Believe it or not, I used to hate crochet pumpkins. Hey crafters, it's Amanda here. Welcome to my channel, Crafters Autonomous. I'm so glad you're here watching today. So where I'm at least, it is the first day of fall. I could not be more excited. Fall is my absolute favorite season. I am enjoying a nice pumpkin smoothie while I film this video. And what is more synonymous with fall than pumpkins themselves? Now my intro statement sounded pretty controversial. I feel like I need to clarify. I didn't necessarily hate crochet pumpkins, but there was a certain loathing that I felt towards them, and here is why. I would get online and I would see people's crochet pumpkins. They would be stinking adorable. I would find the pattern, I would crochet it, and mine would every time turn out like garbage. People would say, oh, it's so simple. You make a rectangle, sew it into a cylinder, cinch the ends closed, stuff it, and weave it, and make the little pumpkin ridges, and bam, you have a pumpkin. I had a lot of issues over many years of attempting to crochet pumpkins. My pumpkins always turned out like garbage, and so because of that, I loved the way they looked. I just never liked the ones I made. Fortunately, last year I had one major breakthrough with my pumpkin making, and it enabled me to start crocheting pumpkins, and I also learned a lot of tips and things along the way that helped my crochet pumpkins turn out better. So to celebrate the start of fall, I am going to share 10 tips so your crochet pumpkins are a success every time. At this point, it is important to make two quick notes before you continue watching this video. Firstly, I'm talking about pumpkins where it's more that generic, you have a rectangle, sew it into a cylinder, seam up the ends. A lot of you will probably know what I'm talking about. If not, you should be able to figure it out based on what I do. I'm not going to really do a full tutorial in this video of how to make a pumpkin, but you'll kind of see the process. The second thing that I feel like I should say is, this might just be me, maybe nobody else in the world struggles with crochet pumpkins because they're actually very simple. So maybe I'm just special and this is like my Achilles heel of crocheting is crochet pumpkins. But something tells me that if I struggle with it, there's probably someone else out there facing similar struggles, or maybe there's something that your pumpkins still turn out great, but you want to take them to the next level, and these tips might help with that. So I just want to get that out of the way and clear the air a little bit before jumping into my 10 tips for crochet pumpkins. Tip number 1 for crochet pumpkins is figuring out how to get the size right. Now, if you're following a pattern and they tell you exactly how many stitches wide and how many rows to do, you won't need to worry about this. But let's say you want to make your pumpkin larger or smaller. How do you actually go about adjusting it? I struggled with this at first because I went, oh no, I'm going to get it wrong and it's going to look bad. But actually there's a very simple way to test if your rectangle is going to be a good size for the pumpkin you want or not. All we're going to do is take our rectangle, fold it in half, and then give it a little bit of a bend. If we like the way it looks, fold it in half and bend just a little bit, then we know that that's a good size for our pumpkin. Now, this one, I want it to be a little bit wider because it is pretty tall, as you can see, even when I kind of fold it over a little bit. So that tells me I need to do a few more rows. So I've worked some more rows, and now I just check it again by folding it in half and kind of bending it. And you know what? I think this is going to create a nice plump pumpkin, so I'm good with that. So tip number 1 is if you're not sure how big to make your rectangle, just test it by folding in half and bending it, and that'll give you a rough idea of what your pumpkin's gonna look like. Crochet pumpkin tip number 2 is how to sew the top and bottom closed, how to cinch them up. Now at this point I've already seamed along the ends of my rectangle to turn it into a cylinder, and y'all, I'm gonna be honest, it is this step right here that made me really hate crochet pumpkins in the past, because this is the step where I could not get it to look right no matter what I did. Basically what would happen is I would weave this closed, pull it tight, and it would look sloppy. There would be a big hole in the middle. I couldn't get that hole to close all the way. So this tip is all about how to weave it together perfectly. And there's two main components to this. The first is we're going to weave it chunky, and the second is we will weave it twice. What do I mean by that? When I weave this closed, my basic strategy is I'm going to go down through the fabric, up through the fabric, down through the fabric, work all the way around like that, and then pull tight to cinch it closed. However, when we do this, it can be really tempting to weave too tightly, meaning I go under this strand and then up right next to it, and then down right through this strand, up through the strand right next to it, and basically really tightly load the loops onto here. So what we want to do instead is we want to weave chunky. Here's what I mean by that. We're not going to go every loop right next to each other. I'm going to go down, going to go over a little bit. See how many rows I'm going past? When I come up. And then I'll go down a little further over, up a little further over, down a little further over, up a little further over. So if we look here, I've gone several inches along the side, but I've only gone up and down like 3 times here. And what this is going to do is this is going to allow us to cinch it up so much tighter than if I were going under every single strand. So I'm going to repeat this all the way around where I'm going to weave it closed chunky. So another thing is try to go through just one strand. So when I go down, I'm going to go through just one strand. When I come up, I don't want to go way under here. See how I've got a ton of fabric above it? I'm just going to come underneath the one strand, right like there, down through one strand, up through just one strand. And that's how I'm going to weave chunky all the way around. Let me finish going all the way around and then I'll show you the part about weaving around a second time. All right, so taking a look at our pumpkin here, I've chunkily woven it closed all the way around. You can see just how long those strands are, how much fabric it cuts across. And now when I cinch it up, it's gonna cinch up really nicely. However, okay, this is the problem I was talking about. That it seemed like no matter how much I tried to cinch it closed, I would always end up with a hole in the middle. Now, normally when I do this, I wouldn't wait till the very end to cinch it up. I would have been cinching it up around as I went, and that would help with this. But let's say you find yourself making a very large pumpkin and you end up with a large hole in the middle. Very simple trick. We're gonna weave around one more time and go slightly further out than from the hole. Here's what I mean by that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come not way along the edge, I'm going to come up along the side. And this time when I weave, I'm not going to go down and up, I'm just going to go through kind of sideways. So right along through here and just kind of go through this section. And this time I'm going to pull it tighter as I go along. And that's what I would have done in the first section. I just want to show you what it looked like. So pull it tight, go to the next section. Again, I'm not going all the way along this opening here. I'm going a little further out. And just from right to left, going under those top strands. Pull it tight, go under some of those strands along the top there. So you can see I'm inserting my needle kind of further out from the hole. Pull it tight, keep repeating this all the way around. You can already see, look how much I am closing up that hole. We're almost cinched up all the way. I'll go through this one last section here. And cinch it closed. And look at that. No more gap in the center. It's cinched all the way closed. So the tip for sewing it closed is to first sew what I call chunky, where we're just skipping a bunch of sections, and then to sew around a second time to get the hole to close up all the way. Here's another look at tip number 2 when I wove together the other side. Look how nice and tight I was able to cinch that center. Ignore the way my pumpkin currently looks, but we're gonna get on to hack number 3. My big tip here is to use a metal tapestry needle, because a metal tapestry needle is gonna have a lot more strength than a plastic one. Personally, I like to use one with a large eye. It makes threading the yarn so much easier, which I have a hack for an easy way to thread yarn. I'll link to that video. And because we're doing what I call that chunky weaving, where we're leaving big gaps between the rows where we're weaving, we can fit this large eye through more easily. The other great advantage of using a metal tapestry needle is sometimes our needle has a really hard time going through. So let me show you what I'm talking about. I've already done my first round of cinching up. I need to do my second round so I can close the hole all the way. I'm gonna come through here, and this is pretty dense fabric. Let's say I'm having a hard time pulling the needle through. Because I'm using a metal tapestry needle, if I start pulling this through and I can't get this needle through, I can use a pair of pliers, grab down low near where it's coming out, and pull through with the pair of pliers. Now in this particular instance, I didn't actually need the pliers. I was just kind of showing for sake of illustration. But sometimes with these pumpkins, you start sewing and your yarn just gets kind of tangled in there and you need a little extra help. If you don't want to use the pliers, let's say maybe you're concerned about damaging your metal needle, which I will say they hold up really well, even with the pliers. Another option is to use a kitchen grippy. So this is like a little grippy. I think Publix still sells these exact ones. We've had these for like a decade and a half probably at this point. It's basically a little grippy for opening baby food jars, but same idea. You can use that to grab your needle and pull it on through if your needle gets stuck. But using a metal tapestry needle really makes seaming and sewing these together so much easier. Crochet pumpkin tip number 4. This is for how to add a little bit more texture and shape to your pumpkin, and this fixes one of my biggest pet peeves with crochet pumpkins. So at this point right here, because I just used half double crochet stitching, there's not so much texture going around the pumpkin. And normally pumpkins kind of have more of these segments, these ridges going around, and right now we don't really have that going on. So what I see a lot of people do to create the segments is they'll have a long piece left after sewing the ends together, and what they'll do is they'll wrap around and then go up through the middle with the yarn, and when they wrap around they pull it tight and it creates these ridges. So now in this case I came around, just I'm not actually doing this method, but they would go around, come up through the center, then go over a little bit more and go around, and then back up to the center, and see how it's starting to create that shape of a pumpkin. Now, I love the shape it creates, but I do not like the look of the strand on the outside of the pumpkin. I don't know why, that's just always really bothered me. Honestly, I've seen a lot of people make pumpkins like this, and theirs turn out cute even with the strand on the outside, so obviously I'm not hating on that method, and if you like that look and like that method, that's totally an option. But for me personally, it's not my favorite look, and when I do it, it always looks so sloppy. That's a big part of it. But there's one little trick that's going to allow us to create more shape without having the strand on the outside. When we go around with the yarn tail to create the ridge, instead of going on the outside, we're going to go through the fabric. Let me show you what I mean. So here's where I want to create my first ridge. So I've already got my tapestry needle on here. I'm just going to kind of go down and come out about here. And what I'm going to do along the side is I'm going to run my needle through the stitching. So see how I'm not going under the stitches, but I'm not going over them. I'm going through the stitches. Give you a closer look. Going through the stitches themselves. And I'll kind of work this in little sections. And I'm going to work in a straight line all the way to the center of the bottom. Work that needle on through the fabric. And as you get closer to the center, it's a little harder to go through the fabric, so just go as far as you can, and then you can come out once you're close to the center. Now, you don't see that tail, but when I pull this tight, it pulls it in just as if it were on the outside, except that we don't see it. So we still get the nice shape without the yarn strand on the exterior. So what I'll do next is I'll go up through the bottom and come out the top center here. And if you can't get it out exactly in the center, that's totally okay, because we're going to put a stem on this later on. Pull it as tight as I want. Now, very important, this is kind of your one chance to adjust this tight, so make sure that you tighten it the amount that you want and create the amount of shaping you want. Now, I'm going to go over just a little bit. I'm going to aim for 6 of these on mine, so I'll go over about 1/6, and I'm going to pick a row and start going through the stitching. Again, it's a little tricky getting it started here at the center just because it's so much texture and fabric there. That's okay, it's a little more forgiving at the center. The main thing is when you're going on this big section of the side that you're working in a straight line and going through the stitches instead of under the stitches or over them. Again, sewing all the way down, working to the center on the bottom. Once more, I can pull. And that's going to create some of that shape. Just like that. And I'll repeat, go back up to the center and then down my next segment. I'm going to create 6 segments and I'll show you how it turns out. So if we take a look here, I finished creating the ridging on my pumpkin. Look at that. We've got that awesome shape and texture, but when we look at the sides, we don't see that thread on the outside. It looks like the fabric just naturally goes in. As a quick note, you might notice a little bit of color peeping through. That's because I use yarn and fabric scraps to stuff my pumpkins because I'm okay with the look of a little bit peeking through. But if you don't like that look, of course you can use polyfill. But now you get the added bonus of extra ridges and texture to your pumpkin without the strands on the outside. Tip number 5 has to do with the stem, and my idea here is just glue the stem on. I see so many patterns where people sew a stem on or crochet it on, and of course those can be great options. They can turn out really cool, but sometimes they can be challenging to actually crochet. So the super simple hack is to make some kind of little stem and just hot glue it on there. If you want me to show y'all how I made this stem, I'd be happy to, but there's a lot of different ways. Let me know if you want a tutorial on this and I will try to make it happen. But I've got my hot glue gun heated up over here. And since I'm going to glue this on, I'm gonna just cut these tails off. And the glue will hold this knot in place. Thank you for talking over my video, Dad. No, I'm talking in the video, that's okay. You're good. But I will just load this up with some hot glue here at the base. I'm also hot gluing over those ends where I cut it so the knot stays. Put a hot glue on here and bam. The pumpkin has a stem. How easy was that? You don't have to stick with crochet stems. You could use a piece of cork, you could use cinnamon sticks, you could use a twig from the yard, whatever you want to use. Pumpkin tip number 6 is to add some texture to your pumpkin by gluing on some raffia. Now, I thought I had some raffia on hand. I didn't when I was filming the video, so just imagine what it would look like. But you've got some other options if you don't want to use raffia. The pieces that I cut off from my stem, I just undid the ply. They're kind of curly-cued like this. And I'm gonna glue these on with a little bit of hot glue. You can trim these if you want, hang them in different directions. I think it's pretty cute like that. Another option to kind of add to the stem, to add some tendrils or more to the vine, is to crochet a spiral little curlicue. And again, you can glue that on if you want. You could also sew that on if you prefer to sew, but the gluing's really quick and easy. I have a video showing several different ways to make crochet spirals. If you want to check that out, I will link to that. But it's another way to add some extra texture and detail to your pumpkin. Tip number 7 is in the same vein, and that is to look up crochet leaf patterns and add one to your pumpkin. Again, you can sew this on or glue this on. I had some leaves already made for another project that I decided to change direction on. And you know, I have this bright red leaf. I think the color looks really cute with the yellow. Honestly, it doesn't really look like a pumpkin leaf, but I think that's kind of cute, honestly. And I'm just gonna glue this on right here. But of course, if you don't want to add a maple leaf to your crochet pumpkin, you can look up some other patterns. There's so many free patterns for crochet leaves out there online. And of course, if I wanted to, I could pull this out more and shorten it, have the leaves closer there. But I think it's kind of cute having the longer stem leaf like that. I've got the little tassels. And again, you can change the color of the leaf, and you can also use a different pattern to get a different result. Pumpkin tip number 8 is to use fun texture yarns to crochet your pumpkins. A great idea is to use chunky yarn. This is some Lion Brand Hometown. Also, neither of these have a stem yet, but you know, we'll just go with it for now. You get so much extra stitch definition with the chunky yarn. It's really neat to see all that texture. And this I just slip stitched in the back loops for this pumpkin. Or you can use something like a Lion Brand Homespun that just has so much softness and plushness and texture to it. This colorway was perfect for autumn. I unfortunately do not know what colorway this is because this was some yarn I was given. But using textured yarn is a great way to automatically give your pumpkin some extra texture. When I worked this one, I believe I did single crochet in back loops only, so that kind of adds some texture naturally. But the yarn itself adds another dimension of texture and just makes it extra cozy for fall. Crochet pumpkin tip number 9 is something you might have picked up on already. This one's really simple, but I think sometimes people need a reminder that it's okay to branch out and be creative. And tip number 9 is you don't have to stick with pumpkin colors. I've never seen a purple pumpkin quite this shade, but you know what? If your fall decor theme is to use purple, why not make a purple pumpkin? You can still tell that it's supposed to be a pumpkin, and now it'll go with your theme and be extra unique. I also really like this because you can buy pumpkins at the store, but they might not have the right shade that you're looking for to match your home decor color scheme. With a little bit of yarn, you can make a custom color pumpkin. And of course, you don't have to stick with just solids. Variegated and two-tone yarn works great as well. And lastly, pumpkin tip number 10 is to use multiple strands of yarn at once to turn your crochet pumpkins into an amazing stash busting project. These pumpkins here in the middle, I use 2 different colors for. These ones here, I use 3 different strands for. But look at how much fun these pumpkins are. I didn't have enough orange to make a bulky orange pumpkin, but by adding a little bit of yellow, I got this really cool variegated pattern. You know, like the little mini pumpkins that come in all the different colors? This is such a neat way to get that kind of effect. I've never seen a pumpkin quite in this colorway, but come on, you can't tell me this isn't fun, this isn't fall. Again, these pumpkins are missing stems. These are like all the ones I'm working on right now. Another fun thing is to use one solid color and then a variegated yarn. So I have the solid green and then this other strand is variegated. Very cool in the colorway, very unique. And by doubling or tripling up on the number of strands I'm using, I can work through so much more of my yarn. I might not have enough of one yarn to make a full pumpkin, but I combine it with the scraps of another yarn. Bam, I have enough for a pumpkin. I've made something useful and decorative. I can give it as a gift. I can use it in my own home. I could sell it at a craft fair or online. And it's a great way to use up those scraps. Now, another thing you can do with this is if you'd use a single color, I showed a technique in my most recent hack video where you triple up on the yarn using one ball of yarn, where you don't separate into smaller balls. You use one skein, one ball of yarn, and you can triple it up using this fancy little trick. That can make some really neat pumpkins. I don't currently have a pumpkin made in that technique. I do have this little whale amigurumi that I use that technique on to get the really thick yarn by using the technique to triple up a single thing of yarn. You can see just how chunky these stitches are, so you can get a really nice chunky pumpkin that way. And again, you're going to use up so much yarn, so it's great for stash busting. There you have it. I hope y'all enjoyed my 10 tips for crochet pumpkins, and hopefully they were helpful to those of you who have had similar frustrations that I've experienced with making crochet pumpkins. Now, of course, this is not by any means an extensive list of all the tips and tricks for crocheting pumpkins, and we all have individual preferences, so there might be things I showed in this video that you don't really care for. There might be things you do another way, and that's totally okay. The goal here is that we're all able to make something that we're happy with. So with that in mind, I want y'all to share in the comments either what your favorite tip is from this video that you found the most helpful, or if you're like, yeah, this is all basic stuff, Amanda, I want you to share your favorite crochet pumpkin making tip for the rest of us so we can all expand our skill set and make even more amazing and beautiful pumpkins. But that's the video. I will catch y'all next time. Happy crafting. Pumpkin smoothie story time. This is a recipe I've been making for probably the last 15 years of my life. This was submitted by Dara O, age 10, from Washington, to the American Girl magazine somewhere in like 2005, 2007 timeframe. And let me just say, Starbucks has nothing on Dara O's Pumpkinnamon smoothie recipe. One of my life goals is to find Dara so I can personally thank her for blessing me with the most delicious pumpkin smoothie recipe ever. My favorite fall treat, right here.